Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, in whatever part of the world. Welcome and welcome back to the people who I'd already spoken in earlier. So we will now get started with the proceedings of the day. The first item that we have on our schedule is a roundtable discussion, and I've been joined by esteemed experts from different parts of the world and from different fields. And our topic today is keeping the human centered in the pivot towards tech. As you know, and as Devyani had explained as well, over the last 20, 30 years, we have seen massive changes in technology. And that has given us the ability to be able to understand our customers, our users much better than we had ever in the past. In the past, we would always get customer data when they actually bought a service or the product. But now the moment somebody thinks of buying something or even exploring, that's when we start generating and extracting and getting the data. So that is going to be the topic of discussion. However, in the horde of going after technology, many people forget about the human aspect of the customer experience, and that is the topic for today. I mean, most of you would have remembered or do remember examples where you're frustrated by on when you used your phone to connect with the customer service, or when you tried to speak with a chatbot on a particular site, but you've constantly been not been able to get your solution to the problem that you face. And that is the interesting aspect which we are going to debate and discuss in our roundtable. So without further ado, let me introduce you to the panel of experts. I'll start with Muthoni Mwangi, who is the consultant and founder of Ukarimu Services. She's joining us all the way from Nairobi. We have Tanu Srivastav, who is joining us from India. She is part of Air Asia. Then we have Katia Atienza. She is an organizational coach and based out of Paris. And last but not least, we have Vijit Singh, who is based in the UK and joining us from there. And he is the founder of iWish. So, welcome to our panel. It's good to have you guys here. Let's start with a brief introduction. We'll start with Kati.
Okay, well, good morning, everybody. I'm very happy to be here. So as Anirban said, I'm an executive organizational coach, but previously I was working in an American multinational for many years, mainly in finance and project management. And I changed to become an organizational coach just to accompany like the different organizations towards their transformation and their changes. So I'm based in Paris, in France, and well, my connection with the topic is because the heart of my job. So really, I'm just like connecting people to all the changes that are happening in our very changing world that we have today, and technology is one of the key topics that I'm accompanying.
Thank you, Kati. Muthoni, let's go to you.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, and Happy New Year. Thank you very much, Roundtable Insights. And I created Ukarimu Services. Ukarimu is a Swahili word that means hospitality and generosity. And I believe that customer service and customer experience all contributes to creating the holistic conditions that help increase brand loyalty and how your customers actually engage with your organization. Technology has played a crucial role, and we have seen a revolution in Africa from mobile to digital to even agricultural and health sectors using all manner of different technologies just to be able to reach people on the ground. Therefore, this topic of technology and also keeping the human centered with technology to create amazing experiences and transform people's lives is also part of my job. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Muthoni. Vijit.
Hey, thanks, Anirvan. Hello, everyone. So I basically run a fairly specialized little agency called iWish. I always think I'm very privileged in my job because it's about going out and getting to grips with your consumers. We actually hate the word consumers because consumer comes from Latin consumo, which is to destroy. But so it's really about understanding people, their behaviors, their attitudes, and getting to that point where you have those aha moments, which is what we call insight, and then using insight to develop essentially new products, propositions, category strategies, brand thinking. That's the kind of thing we do. In some of our sectors, technology has played a massive, massive role. Banking, for example. But being human, I also am a big champion of humans, and keeping that balance between humans and technology. So I'm really looking forward to the discussion today with you all and seeing where we get to. Thank you, Anirvan.
Thank you, Vijit. And now let's go to Tanu in India.
Hello, everyone. I am so delighted to be here. So I work with AirAsia. I look after learning and development and talent for the organization. And this is a topic which is very close to our heart, keeping the human centered in the pivot towards tech. So basically, customer centricity and being guest obsessed is one of our values at AirAsia. So it's part of our DNA, right? And every endeavor that we do is all about enhancing the guest experience. So I agree with you. We don't use customer, the word so much. We use the word guest a lot for us. And I am really excited about this 1 hour that we spend here. And I would look forward to all the insights that we can take away today. Glad to be here.
Thank you, Tanu. And before we get into the real details of the and discussions of the roundtable insights, I just wanted to let the audience know that if you have any questions or if you want to reflect, please use the chat button or please use the questions. We would absolutely love to also hear from you, your thoughts on the topic as well as we go through the session today. So use your chat section, use the questions to ask questions, I guess. Yeah, absolutely. So now let's start with you, Tanu, because literally you mentioned about the guest and you come from the airlines industry, not necessarily take an example of the airline industry, but how has it evolved over the last 10, 15 years in the industry that you come from? How is the technology being used at the same time? How are you keeping up that balance with the human-centered approach?
Okay. So Anirvan, I don't really come from an airline industry, right? I have about 20 years of experience and I've been an entrepreneur, I've been a coach like Katie, I've been multiple things in my life. So in this last year that I have been with the airline industry, I have managed to really understand what goes in elevating the guest experience. And what really strikes me is that for an airline, and especially for a low-cost airline like AirAsia, the service that we bring in is the key differentiator. And how we can elevate that is not about whether you're looking at technology or whether you're looking at the human intervention. It's how we are combining the both together and using that to create excellent experiences. And definitely the way that we have used technology over the years has really, really changed in the last few years. And I see it more in the last 1 year that the pandemic had us grounded, right? So very specifically, what really happened was that the need for distancing was there, the need for contactless payments was there, and that's where we were able to really leverage technology here. And especially given the volume of interactions that were happening with flight cancellations and panicked customers across, so that's where our chat came in, our chat bot, right? Her name is Ava. So really well personalized. The name Ava stands for AirAsia Virtual All Star, and she's a beautiful lady and very efficient, can speak in 12 different languages and can handle 25,000 queries at the same time. So literally this is how technology merged in very beautifully for us, right? And with all the complaints that were flooding in, Eva's handling the complaints, but what cannot get handled by her gets directed to a live agent who in turn supports us. So that's one thing that I really see. And the best thing about having a chatbot is it's available she's on Facebook, on web, on your mobiles through WhatsApp as well. And we made it in Hindi and English so that a lot of our flyers were migrant workers this time going home because of the lockdowns. They were also able to use that. So that was one of the things that I have seen change in. And the other thing which is really striking this year specifically is this in coordination with the Bangalore airport, we introduced a facial recognition system. So what you do is when you walk into the airport, right, with the facial scanning, it's almost paperless. You just walk in right to the boarding gate. There are no document checks in between. And that is how technology has really stepped in to enhance the guest experience, to make the travel experience really seamless, right? It's not to say that it can compensate for the human experience over here, because as research really shows for airlines, what people prefer is, they want the digital experience for your ticketing and for your web and all of that. But over the years, they still prefer a human interaction at the boarding gate. They will still prefer a human interaction in flight, so that's how we have, balanced both the human aspect as well as the technology aspect, and really try to focus on creating a good experience for our guests. And I think the one thing that we really do is we measure. We have metrics which keep evaluating our guest experience. So we use the net promoter score. So that's again one way of keeping abreast of what guests want from us and keep updating here as we go. That's
Thank you for that elaborate explanation. I think that really helps and set the tone for our discussion now. Muthoni, you've been engaged with the hospitality sector, and this is where, again, we don't have customers, we have guests. So, what's your take, especially from an African perspective?
Thank you very much. From an African perspective, I can say that human centricity, we've been using customer insights technologies and software, for example. In the African context, we are storytellers. I'm sure you've from the time we met, you know that I love telling stories and engaging with customers in an inherently personal way, like Joe Pine, who is the basically a customer experience guru. He says that customer experience is how we engage our customers in an inherently personal way, thereby creating a memory. So the engagement in the African context, using storytelling, using customer insights, and also using softwares that have the customer relationship management components. So whenever we use the systems that the property management systems that we use in hotels, which have a customer relationship component, we gather as much information as possible from the time a booking is made. And that actually helps us to be able to map out all of the customer journeys. So we'll understand the consumer, whether they like a certain pillow, for example, whether they have a dietary requirement, whether they might have accessibility issues. And then we can be able to map out their journey from the time they come to the time that they leave. So customer insights has been very important. And also training the internal guests, basically the employees, has also been very crucial in investing in the human-centered capacity, because it's the employees who have the skills, the soft skills and the emotional intelligence skills that are so crucial in having engaging conversations, to try and ask crucial questions and have conversations where as much information as possible is collected, because it's in customizing and personalizing experiences that makes all the difference. So in the hotel industry, we have a lot of machines that are used. So you'll find that technology will carry out certain tasks and help the employees be able to carry out their tasks in an effective way, in a timely manner, and reliability. And being able to use these technologies also improves the internal employee experience. And as a result, the way Richard Branson says, when you take care of your employees, your employees will take care of your customers. I was quite surprised that he said clients do not come first, it's the employees that come first. So the human centricity is very important, because in looking at the Virgin Atlantic experience, when Virgin Atlantic was also here in Kenya, for example, I have a friend who was working with Virgin Atlantic, and of course, Virgin Atlantic has now left Kenya, but she said that without the shadow of a doubt, should they come back, she will leave her job and go back to Virgin Atlantic, because they invested in the employee experience to an elevated level, whether it was giving them benefits when it came to their health insurance that covered them from head to toe, including also covering family members, They were always trained, and all this training was actually accessible online. Therefore, you're finding that a lot of training organizations are actually capitalizing on digitizing their content to make it available in Kenya, and of course other African countries. And there are very many other initiatives that are taking place. Like, for example, with Virgin Atlantic, they stopped using the human resource software that monitored the time that you come in and the time that you leave. And this actually increased the productivity of staff because they didn't feel that they were being constantly monitored. So I think I'll stop there because, as I said from the beginning, which was a disclaimer, my stories are very many, and there are very many different examples of how you can improve the human centricity for the employees, who will in turn create a memorable experience for the customer.
Yeah, I think that was a great, actually, as part of a story that you just started. So, and we will continue the discussion. There are a few points that you raised which are very critical. Employee experience, you talked about. You talked about the customer experience, the customer journeys through different angles. So now I'm going to ask Kati. Now, Kati, you and I, we have known each other for almost 20 years, actually more than 20 years. And you were back then were associated with customer services, and now you've done your journey in the last 20 years. Now you're an organizational coach. How is the customer experience and the way you deal with in your from a coaching perspective, but also Mutoni mentioned about emotional intelligence and about the empathy which is centric to customer experience. What's your take? How what are you seeing as changes in the world that we live today?
Yeah, indeed. Well, what it's really happening is like technology is a revolution. So everybody loves technology because it facilitates your life. It replaces all the boring or repetitive work. So this is like a great advantage. And so people can get more focus on the value added task and the value added, so the quality aspects or where humans can really bring something. So for me, one of the most important things that we really work with customers and in the real life at the end is like being aware that technology is there, that technology is there to help us. So I was reading recently a survey made by Opinion Way for Microsoft here in France. And Microsoft, that is really a high-tech company, was saying they strongly believe that digital technology should be at the service of people and not the other way around. So actually, this is really what I'm driving with customers and in my life. As it's like being aware that we live in a VUCA world. I don't know if you know what VUCA means. So meaning that the world today is volatile. So it's really like changing all the time. It's uncertain because one day is sunny and the another day is stormy, right? There are a lot of complexity and a lot of ambiguity. So we really need a human being needs to be ready to be being adapted to the new situations that are happening, and finding this balance to really like say, okay, today I'm working as a customer service, as you explained at the beginning. Tomorrow I will be a finance professional, and the day after tomorrow, maybe I will be just like having a family and just working from home as we are today. So we are this kind of facility. And the other thing that is very important is like I really strongly believe in the emotional intelligence, and Mutoni said, and also in the collective power of the connections between people. And right now in this pandemic situation, we have seen that we have been forced to be like locked down and being at home. And when we are getting a little bit of freedom, what we just want is to be outside and just like meet people and be surrounded by people. So then what I think as well, like the customer centric and technology is also like having a connection over there. So we love technology because it's great, but at the end of the day, what we love much more is people.
Thank you. That's a great start to the discussion here. Mutoni, echoing your thoughts, there's Marie Claire who mentions, I definitely agree, Mutoni Mwangi, treating your team/employees well being is very rewarding, or employees well is very rewarding. So this was one of the chats that has come up, and I encourage the other audience members to keep posting on the chat, and also if you have questions for the panelists, please put them in the questions button. Now, Vijit, you have been in the innovations industry ever since I've known you, and that's again close to 2 decades now. Um, and here you talk about immersion, and I think immersion or immersive experience these days, it has become very, very critical. How are things that you deal with in your workspace or otherwise, how is that immersion driving your solution designs these days?
So, and even it's a great question. In some ways, I suppose being an insider in what we do, we kind of specialize in kind of first-hand immersive experiences. Now, that's the first thing, which is really about taking clients who, guys, I'm not a particularly PC guy, so my apologies if I offend anyone. But very often, if you look at the clients and sort of the clients that we're dealing with, which is essentially big corporates, and if you look at the people that they're actually serving, so their customers and their consumers, they actually come from two very, very different worlds. And we very often struggle with kind of almost creating solutions for the great and the good at corporates that very often can happen. And we kind of forget about the man on the street. So our entire approach is like, look, guys, let's get down to street level. Let's truly get to grips with people. Let's understand them. Let's understand what makes them tick, what makes them jump out of bed, what keeps them awake at night. And we find that, when if we get that immersive aspect right, the rest of the project is a doddle. It's easy. If we struggle there, we've had it. One of the biggest challenges we've faced is actually going out on the ground to somewhere exotic we may not have been before, and we go there and we experience things that literally makes the hair stand up on the back of our necks. We've been in tears sometimes. You end up forming like these having incredible experiences. You end up creating such beautiful relationships. And you come back and you play back now, okay? We're now in a boardroom somewhere and we're playing back saying, wow, we had this awesome experience and we want to do X, Y, and Z. These are the insights that we've got. And people have stood there, bunch of suits going, really? And that's where that first-hand experience is so important. I think for when you can see the color of somebody else's eyes, that human touch, you just can't beat it. But technology plays a major role. Something really super simple. So using the analogy, if Muhammad cannot go to the mountain has to come to Muhammad. So for us, that magical power sometimes is film. So, we film the experiences, and believe it or not, having a cool camera doesn't mean that people freeze up or whatever. After a while, they just become used to it. It's just something in the environment. So it's a great way to bring the customer to life. And then we're now starting to get into the whole mindset and culture aspect. My fellow panelists, when I was listening to them right now, it was literally like nectar. The customer centricity that came through when Tanu was speaking, Mutoni talking about people, Kati talking about balance, all of these elements. The other side, and now getting down more towards technology. I mean, look at us now, right? COVID, we're all sat at home. And we're doing something that we would never have been able to do had it not been for technology. And we found actually during COVID times, for ongoing projects, and this, it's strange because a lot of people have just pulled the handbrake and they're waiting for all of this to end before they then continue with, all the activities they need to be doing to be getting stuff out the door. But actually, this is a really interesting time to be doing something like immersions by using technology, using something as simple as Zoom the beauty is you're getting people at home. And we have this little saying: people, we're not lab rats, and I hate lab rat environments. So even when we go off into different markets, we're not using sort of classic interview rooms with one-way screens, which is almost like how you would interrogate a prisoner, or conduct identification in a lineup. It's about meeting people in real people in real world environments. And actually, something like Zoom just brings that alive. You're getting people at home, and it's absolutely magic. I'll stop there, Nirvan, for now. I'll hand back to you. I hope that
Yeah, no,
helps.
absolutely. I mean, I like the emotions, the way you describe things, and I think this kind of circles back to a lot of the points that Tanu or Mutoni and Kati raised. Mutoni, question for you. Kati mentioned about VUCA, which is volatile, uncertainty, complex, and ambiguous, right? That's a way of life in Africa and in a major part of emerging markets. Is that a big deal, or are there lessons that could be learned from the emerging markets that the Western world can actually learn from?
Wow, that's a fantastic question. Thank you very much. And when looking at resilience, Africa has been looked at like a dark continent for very many years. And I took on this assignment of also joining this panel so that I could also do as much research as possible on the African continent. Because when someone is in one industry, your examples and experiences are quite limited. So coming from the tourism and hospitality industry, one of the issues that has been experienced that limits the memorable experience is poaching. And technology has embraced African old African heritage. So different African communities would manage the wildlife by analyzing the footprints. And in Namibia, for example, there's a technology that has emerged of footprint identification technology that is actually helping the wildlife sector and, of course, promoting the tourism sector by promoting endangered species to protect that. So that's already one example. And when looking at vulnerability, we can also look to countries such as Nigeria and Rwanda, and also South Africa when it comes to healthcare, for example, because when looking at issues of healthcare and looking to accessibility of healthcare, we can see the emergence of how social and digital has actually helped different Africans have access to different technologies. And if we look at Rwanda, for example, we now have the drone technology that's actually facilitating and transforming lives when it comes to accessing blood. And in Nigeria, they've also done the same, where there was a lady who started an organization and she's contributing to delivering oxygen and also blood, especially right now at a time of COVID, when technology is actually helping us save lives and provide access to essential services as fast as possible. Of course, we're also looking at how technology is helping us reach people faster and save lives because of the deficit of proper infrastructure such as roads. So this example, like in Rwanda, for example, and in Nigeria, for example, we are seeing how adaptation and innovation is happening at a very fast speed. I don't know if I've answered your question appropriately.
That's a start of the story, and
Yes.
it's a wonderful start. So at this stage, there are two things I would do. One is Fei Kemi Tunde Alabi. The person has mentioned machines cannot take over emotional intelligence from human beings. This is why human investment is really crucial. Um, at this time, I would also ask a question to the audience. I mean, we're talking about human aspects, and we're talking about keeping it human centric, and yet majority or large number of companies, businesses, corporates, organizations around the world have just gone ahead because it's cheaper to do, it's more efficient to do, and they have just adopted technology. Is human aspect really a big deal, or are we just saying, hey, in front of cost, everything else is secondary? So I would want to hear from the audience your opinion on this one. Is human centricity that big a deal in front of cost? Or are we just saying, hey, you know what? It's a good discussion item. It's a good coffee table discussion. So that's what I want to hear from the audience. Audience, please use the chat button and post your comments here. While they do it, let's come back here to the panel discussion. Um, what are some of the challenges people face when you start bringing in human centricity in the horde of getting into new technology? Because again, new technology these days, the marketing gimmicks, the gizmos that comes with the new technology, like chatbot. If you have a website that doesn't have a chatbot, you're like, seriously, you're still working in the 20th century. So those are the kind of things that people talk about. So there is this whole push, peer pressure. Tanu, you've been in the learning and development space as well, and you have seen usage. What's your take? The how do you bring back the human centricity to the table for discussion?
So it's not a question of bringing it back, Anirvan, because it never leaves, right? It's the biggest deal. As I said earlier, also, technology can supplement it, but it cannot take over what humans can do. And especially in an industry like mine, or maybe across all industry that I've trained in, it's the key, right? And in a country like ours, right, since everybody was talking about, we have a quote which goes like "Atithi Devo Bhava." You would know that it means your guest is like God for you, right? And we also so that is something which we always focus on and train our people in, and try and create that awareness, because that's the main thing. That's what keeps our business going. We also have this very important quote by Gandhi. I remember many years back when I used to train, and I used to talk about it, and it goes something like, your customer is the most important visitor in your premises. Okay, you're not doing him a favor by serving him. He is doing you a favor by allowing you to serve him, and he's not an interruption to your business. He is the reason for your business. So these I remember were the quotes we used to use very often, and it is now ingrained in all our staff here as well, and all our employees here across all levels, right? We have this quote up on all our training rooms in at the airport, so that we just don't forget that human centricity is the biggest deal. Technology can support us. It makes life easier, definitely, for a lot of guests, because when companies adopt technology, that's how they grow. If you don't adopt it, you get left behind. But how do you make it how does it evolve continuously while taking the humans along with it? That's the key differentiator. It's not a replacement. It's an add-on. It's a value add-on, and together only they can create great values. It's not one or the other. It has to be both together. So human centricity can never go out of the picture. It is always there on the table.
Right. So that's a great example and a segue to my next question. And this is for Vijit. Vijit, you've worked with different organizations and companies. My challenge is what I find, especially with customer experience, and especially over the last 10, 15 years, is when it comes to monopoly companies, when it comes to utility companies, whether they're cable operators or electricity, they don't seem to hear about the human centricity, when it comes. So, for example, they've now gone into chatbots. Earlier, it used to take me 3 minutes to get in touch with somebody. These days, an average waiting time is 10, 15 minutes to get there. What should these guys do? Because on one side, they have the cost pressure. On the other side, they need to have the humans not leave their table, as Tanu pointed out. What's your advice on that front? I guess the moment something happened, Vijit has gone off the radar. So while Vijit is coming back, let me just read out some of the comments the audience made. So let's see. Dean Smith, technology should help people and can generate more interesting work options. If done well, with build better workforce engagement and motivation. Valerie Maris, this could be the risk that companies look at the cost, but at the end of the customer set the tone and they can have an influence. And then we have, there's another comment here. Let's have a look. Jeroen says, I see technology getting better to deal with emotional intelligence. In some services, can get better experience than human beings from the other global regions, filling in customer service on the phone. And then that's pretty much it. Okay, we'll wait for widgets to come up again. But, maybe Kati, let's take that same question and see what should the utility companies do, who are notoriously known for going after technology because that's cost cutting and not necessarily keeping in mind the human centricity. At least that's the perception people have. That's the feeling people get.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the strategy and the vision of the companies is to be the more efficient as possible, so get the higher profit with the less costly. So that's like normal, and that's right. They are just replacing some tasks, and not only replacing by technology, but we are also like bringing and opening up to the outsourcing. So going to other countries that are like the human capital is like cheaper. So this is like the real life, and this is going to continue and happen every time. But as Tanu said, humans cannot be replaced fully. So there are like things that are going to be replaced because it will be like it was making more sense, it's more effective. But finally, to have a quality and to have like everything linked to the emotional intelligence and the evolution of the social life, humans needs to be behind. So there is a change on the jobs and the task, and this is what like companies needs to invest. So it's really like the more quality, more analytical, just to like evolve together with technology, but not replacing it completely. So that's what it's my feeling. There is also kind of a limit, because the big question is until when technology could get or could replace the humans. And then it's when the topic of ethics comes into the table. And this is a big thing that with all the artificial intelligence saying sometimes you get scared when you just like get all these pop-ups that gets into your computer because you have been doing a search in internet, and then suddenly the next day you have all the publicity of like the product or the service that you are looking. So sometimes you get scared saying, wow, they are really controlling my life. And that's why we need to be really careful, because people don't like to be controlled in everything what they do. At the beginning, it's kind of fun because you say, "Wow, that's great. That's exactly what I was looking for." But in everything that you do, you get somebody watching you. So that's my takeaway, I think, to open the discussion.
Yeah, that's a very interesting angle, and we'll come to you in just a second. Um, Somebody watching you, and I think that is actually a very, and this is again for any one of you. Um, that is one of the bigger concerns which a lot of people have these days in different organizations, which is the privacy of human centricity. Because this is where, especially in the Western world, there's a lot more drive to not be able to share or understand or give out data which is related to consumers, customers, guests, employees, etc. Um, how does one go about balancing the two? Yes, I want to know about my customer, or I want to know how my clients are, interacting, or what the needs are, what do they feel emotional about. I think that's a very key and important part, because literally when customers do a transaction, it's a business, it's a functional need fulfillment, but it's the emotional part that is the essence of experience, right? How do we bring in a balance between the data that's required to understand a customer emotionally without stepping on the privacy aspect of those individuals? So any one of you can take this question. So in that case, I would give it to Vijit has also again got stuck. So Tanu, maybe we'd start with you.
Yeah. So I think, Anirvan, what matters here is the ethics and the business ethics that we operate under, right? And very specifically, as it's always a concern, right? Cybersecurity and leakage of your data is it's a real concern, and it's so much prevalent right now in India with this whole WhatsApp thing happening. I don't know if I should even talk about it right now here, but literally, it's a scare, and it's a very real scare, and that's where the ethics of the company come into the picture, right? And at AirAsia, we are backed by two powerhouses. One is AirAsia, and one is the Tata Group. And the Tata Group, if you would all know, is known for its ethics. So it's your way of doing business, and it's the way of providing security for your guests and ensuring that this is not breached. So you really need to take those kind of safeguards to ensure that data is secure, your guests feel secure with you, so that they would want to come back to you again and again and share whatever information they want to with you. So I think here it really boils down to, again, guest centricity, customer being customer obsessed, and ensuring for their safety as well. It's the responsibility of the organization to do so, and they need to take all safeguards for it.
Right. So let me ask Vijit. Now I'm hoping that we have a stable connection with you. Tanu mentioned about ethics, and she mentioned about the ethics of the group company. The two companies that are promoters, and we're talking about human centricity. Often they may not go hand in hand. So what is considered ethical by a certain group of company may not be considered in line with the individuals, the employees. What's your take?
And even, there's a couple of things I'd love to say here. So the first one is, guess what, right? Guess why I went off? So my internet provider on the call realized that there was quite a bit of, obviously, traffic from my side. So they very helpfully switched my connection off. Now, that is a great example of kind of so-called customer centricity that has gone totally wrong. So they think they're being helpful, but it's gone horribly wrong here. Another great example, right? You're traveling abroad, you're somewhere, it's the middle of the night, trying to check into a hotel, and they'll block your card. Again, they're trying to help prevent fraud, but they've done you a disservice. What you were talking right now, we in the UK and the EU, it's just another acronym, but it's the same almost anywhere in the world. We deal with things like GDPR, right, around data protection, and that one of the issues we're dealing with, believe it or not, is not sort of, on one hand, you have people that are incredibly unethical when it comes to kind of consumer interactions, and there is just this kind of this obsession with gathering data to the point that it just becomes really kind of quite unfriendly and cumbersome. You take China, for example, and it's strangely one country that I have not directly myself worked in, my team has. But apparently in China, people are actually quite happy to part with their data because A, it's kind of mandatory, but B, the companies are starting to do some really interesting things with the data that they accumulate. So it comes to a couple of things, it comes to this concept that I call value exchange. So, if you want to provide you're happy to provide something. If you receive in turn, it kind of strangely goes back to what Tanu was saying, or if you read Khalil Gibran's The Prophet, in some ways, I think there's this chapter that says the joy in receiving far exceeds that of giving. So, it's super interesting if we start to do the right things, if we actually have the right mindset, the right culture, if you feel it here, not just thinking kind of strategically from here or what technology is telling us. I think you have to feel it here. Then we're in a really, really wonderful place. The problem, and I'm sorry, this is like me going off on a bit of a soapbox, and it actually links to your previous question, Anirvan. With every time I speak to your lovely wife, Devyani, it's what we talk about in the mornings. It literally is our conversation opener in terms of a really bad experience that we've had with one of the giants out there. that is meant to be a benchmark, a global benchmark in terms of customer centricity, but it's exactly the opposite. For example, when you're trying to get hold of somebody, when you're on hold for 15 minutes and they're saying, well, have you been to the website? Well, where on earth have I got your number from in the first place? There are some moments when you want a person, and equally there are some moments when you don't want to be dealing with a person at all. It's that sort of balance. And the issue we have, and this is my soapbox moment, is it's this kind of, it's almost like this invisible force at these giant companies. Take people aside to the coffee machine, talk to them one-to-one, talk to them outside of their workplace, and they are, and excuse me for using this term, enlightened. And yet you go back into the company, come together, get into the corporate mindset, and sure, there are exceptions. I mean, I've been listening to Tanu, who comes from, is representing, not today she's here as herself, but, she's with AirAsia. You can see it's not words, it's not posturing, it's not political, it's genuine. You can see it. And yet that is totally lost in these companies, and I call it the invisible force. And that is the greatest danger to customer centricity and this balance between human and technology.
Thanks, Vijit. Wonderful articulation of the thoughts there. Muthoni, let's come to you. Let's call it not ethics, because ethics can be interpreted in different ways. Let's call it business standards, right? The way businesses are conducted, right? The business practices. So in Africa, and based on my experience there, in Africa, I know that usually there are sort of three different forces that act. You've got the big companies who've got the big sort of business standards, business practices. Then you have, let's say, the African continent culture. If and I don't want to sort of generalize and put everybody in one basket, but let's say the sub-Saharan Africa, where there's certain similarities in East Africa, for example, and then you have the rush to get up to speed with what's happening around globally. Given all of this, does human centricity still have the same level of um, let's call it the table, a seat at the table? I mean, or is it an afterthought? Is it a lip service? Is it a pleaser, crowd pleaser to talk about human centricity? So, what's your take?
Thank you very much. That's a fantastic question. So when it comes to the business standards and also the rush up to speed, I remember my father always told me in my local dialect that that as I grow up, I shouldn't get into the rut of trying to compare myself with others. So when you're in the entrepreneurial space, a lot of people tend to do all of this just to look as if they are trendy. So when talking about being human centricity, a lot of firms will talk about being human centric also because of the human rights element. And of course, as you've said, you're replacing the word business standards with ethics, for example. So when you were having the earlier conversation and also with Vijit, I also had several soapbox moments in my mind um, where I looked at the sub-Saharan African context, and ethics, for example, can be used in political campaigns. So technology, for example, in as much as this is a conversation talking about the role of technology, human centricity to create customer experience cannot work in countries that are having conflict, for example. So when looking at how we can use technology to create peace, which is a prerequisite for any entrepreneur, coming from Kenya, for example, you will find that a lot of political candidates will buy data. They will use the same technology that's emerging to buy data and align it according to their campaigns so that they can tell their constituents what they want to hear. So there's ethics there, but I'm not a politician. I'm just giving an example of how the political space, for example, is is rushing to use technology, which is working to their advantage. But at the same time, there's the human-centric angle where there are human watchdogs on the ground, because you'll find that all over the world, also not just in Africa, but globally, including the last American presidential campaign, we could see how technology, whether it's digital, whether it's mobile, whether it's social, is very powerful in either promoting peace or being completely destructive and having hate speech. So you have the human centric touch when it comes to politics and when it comes to creating peace to avoid any disruption that, of course, upon it happening, the global economy will just fall apart. So the human-centric touch is there to play the role of being a watchdog and also calling out these people and saying stop. And of course, I also like the fact that the human-centric touch uses technology to put off anybody that is promoting hate speech. And then when it comes to the data protection, for example, I had used Virgin Atlantic before, and Virgin Atlantic was also very key in ensuring that when it came to the travel industry, for example, if I made a booking and I told my mom I'm coming down to Nairobi next week, my mom cannot call Virgin Atlantic, for example, to try and have access to my booking unless I have given the booking, unless I have given Virgin my mother's details, for example, and said, anybody who would like to trace my booking, should I go off, you can give my mother my details, for example. So unless the booker or the individual is concerned, Virgin does not share any information at all. And of course, it also helps them be able to track customers that could be crafty, for example. So say, for example, I called the first time and asked for a discount and they gave me a 150 discount. Then I call back the next time hoping to get a different agent and get a three and say, your former colleague actually told me that I could have a $300 discount as opposed to a 150 discount. So their system is done in a way that you have all the updates, all the employees. The human-centric touch would now be where all the agents are putting in all the different additions and making all the different changes, and then coming back to the system, applying data protection and also the information that you've put in. And also looking at business standards. Another interesting emerging technology has been how the blockchain technology is being used in African extractive industries. So you can look to the Democratic Republic of Congo with cobalt, for example. So from cobalt to the mobile phone. You can look at the diamonds industry, for example, and also the illegal logging of timber, for example. So I'm very into creating natural spaces and using wood. So if, for example, I would want my wood to come from the Central African Republic, I would want to understand the certification process. So you're also having this blockchain facilitating supply chain, and at the same time, it's helping with the ethics. And at the same time, it's very human centered because now you're looking at how you can use technology for business and also promote human rights at the same time. So it's a very interesting topic, and also how you can balance the human centricity, how you can balance the human centricity of the processes and the human centricity of the human rights, the human centricity of effectiveness, and also efficiency. So let me stop there, hoping I've answered your question appropriately.
You have. And since we're kind of edging towards the end of the program, let's take a couple of questions that the audience has asked. So the first one is from Faye Kemi. What do we do to ensure human jobs are not completely taken over by machines slash robots? Maybe Kati, you can take this.
Yeah, sure. I also like responding to the chat box, but I'm going just to reformulate. We need to adapt ourselves. So we are not just in a world where we are going to have the same job all our life. So it's not like our past generation, as our grandparents. So we need to be aware of this. And one thing is clear: machines cannot be doing by themselves. They need humans behind. So then machines cannot think. Well, they think what they ask them to think, but they are not creative. They don't have feelings, not emotions. So there will have a limit. So in order to adapt the robots to be don't become a kind of like old fashioned, they need to have somebody saying, when you get this question you need to respond this. It gets very standard, and when it gets very personalized, machines, they don't know what to do. So we will always need to have a human behind, but we need to be aware that we need to evolve with them, because this is like changing very fast, and we need to like do this, follow the flow of what technology is bringing us. And if we do this, I think we will never have this kind of risk saying, wow, the world is just managed by robots.
Excellent, thank you. In fact, I just got an instruction from the timekeepers here saying we need to start wrapping up. So, but before we do that, let's hear in a couple of sentences from each one of you. What do you see is the future of the topic that we just spoke about? So, Vijit, we start with you.
Anirvan, for me, the future here is, something around the perfect blend. So let's call it like human-powered technology. And I think actually Kati raised a very interesting point around vice versa. And I think what's going to drive it is the right culture and mindset.
Excellent, Mutoni. The future,
Thank,
yeah.
yes, thank you very much. So the future of technology and balancing it with human is very important, because in as much as AI has also created customer sentiments feedback, the most powerful is actually the human powered. So when it comes to the way forward, I believe that the balance is very important also when it comes to human rights, because at the end of the day, consumers are also becoming activists that are very active on digital and social and all over the place. So I think, so we're doing very well. Thank you.
Excellent. Tanu, I'll use the same question but with a bit of a twist. From jobs perspective, how are jobs going to change, keeping in mind the human centricity and technology mash up together?
So I think pretty much relating back to what Kerry said in the beginning was that it's a VUCA world, right? The same skills which applied earlier are not applicable now. And just as technology is evolving, we human beings also need to keep upgrading and upskilling ourselves at every turn possible. And instead of looking at technology as the enemy, it might be a good idea to see how we can, integrate it into our own growth as well. And I could be really old school about this once upon a time, but I have really seen the value that technology can get in enhancing every kind of experience. So it's best to embrace it and to look at how you can keep upskilling yourself so that jobs are always there for you. That's the only thing that I can say over here, because it's, if we just shut ourselves against it, then there's no growth. Companies need technology to grow. We need it to grow and make our lives easier. So just let's accept it and keep evolving along with it. Keep upskilling. That's it.
Thank you, Tanu. And Kathy, last one from you.
Yeah, I fully agree with Tanu, and I will think that the future is on us. So it depends on us. If we just like keep positive and just take advantage of what technology can bring us, everything will go well.
That's an excellent way of putting it. So, with that, it kind of brings us to the end of this wonderful roundtable insights. But before I close, just a thought, and this is something that I've learned from Amazon and Netflix. When they end a session, they'll always have a cliffhanger, which essentially make people want for more. And we'll come back on this topic again probably next year. And that is human centricity and technology has also a negative angle where the two blend together. And we've heard from you guys where they talk about manipulating human intelligence, whether it's through, social media. I'm not going to name names, but social media or news, fake news, which is again driving a sort of polarization in the society. Okay, so I think what I want to leave the people in the audience as well as the group here is, yes, we need to keep that human centricity, as Tanum pointed out, at the table. But at the same time, we need to get technology into our lives, but we should not become subordinated to both these things. We should not be subservient to both of these. At the end of the day, we need to still remain at the top as the human race. With that, I would close the session. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.